Both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are participating in town hall events in battleground states today. Harris is in Pennsylvania, where she'll sit down for a discussion with CNN anchor and 60 Minutes correspondent Anderson Cooper. Trump's holding a faith-based town hall in Georgia with the state's lieutenant governor, and tonight he'll speak at a rally hosted by the conservative super PAC Turning Point. Latest CBS polling shows a dead heat in the battleground states. You see it there on your screen. The candidates tied in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. For her part, Harris holds a slight lead in Michigan and Nevada. For his part, Trump has an edge in Georgia, Arizona, and North Carolina. All of the races, though, are within the margin of error as we head into the final leg of the campaign. The Trump campaign is also responding to allegations from Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly. The New York Times reports Kelly said the former president would govern like a dictator if elected. The one-time chief of staff to Trump also said that his boss said, quote, Hitler did some good things. In a statement, the Trump campaign took a swipe at Kelly, saying in part that he has beclowned himself. The campaign also called the stories debunked and said Kelly fabricated them. Vice President Harris addressed the comments earlier and warned voters that Trump would weaponize the military, she said.
It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans.
CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion is in Duluth, Georgia. That's northeast of Atlanta. It's also where the Trump rally is being held tonight. So, Nikole, John Kelly was a chief of staff to Trump the last time he was president. So how concerning are these comments?
Well, this is someone that worked very intimately with the former president for well over a year, so he does know him very well and was someone who was inside the room on a number of critical conversations and decisions. But that being said, I would note that, certainly the retired general has a bit of a strained relationship with the former president, and that this isn't the first time that he has expressed concerns about the former president's fitness for office. And so he is just now expanding on some of these comments, telling the New York Times he was doing this in part because of some of the concerns that he had with respect to some of the former president's recent comments about the so-called enemy within and potentially threatening to use the military against American citizens. And so to that, he did tell the New York Times that when the former president was president during his administration, that the former president was told many times that he doesn't have the authority to use the military against American citizens. And so that is just one of several comments that he made. You, of course, cited some of the others, but certainly it is having a ripple effect, certainly in terms of the political headlines here. But I would say in talking to a lot of the voters here at this rally here in Duluth, it's something that they feel is just another hit job in their view from the left.
It's interesting because Kelly's a retired U.S. Marine Corps general. So when he's talking about weaponizing the military, for some people that's going to have a lot of credibility. But you've been talking to Trump supporters. Tell us how they're coming to Trump's defense.
Well, as I mentioned, and many of them have been lining up here for hours now, but, look, they just feel in their view that this is more of the same, that people are always throwing something at the former president, and this is just yet another attack. From their perspective, they stand by the former president and his policies. Most of the voters we talked to supported him previously in 2016 and 2020 and said that the retired general's comments don't change their view of the former president. Take a listen.
Both sides should walk the same. Absolutely, yes. And, here's the thing that I want to let people know, is that the Republicans and Democrats need to learn to work together, because if I'm not mistaken, when you work for the government, you're going to help people, right or wrong?
Did he run this country as a dictator the 4 years he was in? Absolutely not. No wars. The economy was absolutely incredible. Everybody's making money. He wasn't a dictator then. Why should you be a dictator now?
So again, as you heard from both of those voters, including that last woman, her argument is simply that, look, the policies under the former president, in her view, were good. And so she wants to see that continued. So she doesn't buy what, John Kelly is selling in terms of some of the comments that he made to the New York Times. The other voter, of course, as you heard from there, too, really concerned about the rhetoric from both sides, considering that recent assassination attempt against the former president, not only in Butler, Pennsylvania, but also in Mar-a-Lago over the summer.
And at this point in the campaign, Nikole, as you well know, there's a lot of voters who are locked in, but there's also those voters who are still maybe making their decisions. And on that note, former President Obama is joining VP Harris on the trail tomorrow. He's been trying to message to young men. Talk to us a little bit about what he said on a new basketball podcast.
Yeah, that's right. Well, this is part of an ongoing appeal that the former president is making, particularly to young men and young men of color. So in terms of targeting this NBA podcast, really his message was, don't sit out on this election, that you want to support somebody who sees you. He talked to them about understanding why they may be a little disenchanted with the political process, understanding that some of these young people may have come up while he was president, and that obviously with the pandemic, certainly a lot of people's economic fortunes and fate changed. And so that's why maybe now some of these younger male voters may feel like the political process isn't working for them. But he did make the point of saying, you wouldn't let older folks decide, what clothes you're going to wear, what shoes you're going to wear. So why would you let them decide who should become president, in essence? And so he really was trying to encourage, those young men to exercise their right to vote, explaining why it is so critical, and also defending Vice President Kamala Harris's record as well, saying that she is someone who kind of follows some of the same ideals that he held as president, to give everybody a fair shot. So also trying to kind of explain what she might do if she is elected to 4 years in office. But certainly will be notable to see the two of them on stage together here in the Atlanta area tomorrow. This will be the first time they appear together since the former president endorsed her over the summer.
All right, Nikole Killion, thank you.